We are absolutely delighted today to be joined by Claire Mason. Claire is a research fellow at the Centre for Child and Family Justice Research at Lancaster University, and her work has particularly focused on the lived experiences of families within the child protection and family justice systems. Alongside this, she is the director of the Giving Hope project. Now, this is a social enterprise working to improve practice when the state intervenes at birth due to safeguarding concerns. And today, Claire and a member of the Hope Mothers group is going to be discussing the Hope Boxes. This is a therapeutic co-produced initiative that very much sits at the heart of the Giving Hope project. We are also very fortunate to be joined by Helen Davies, who is the team manager for the Birmingham and Solihull Family Drug and Alcohol Court team. Helen's been working with Partners in Health and Children's Services to look at the opportunity to embed this initiative within the FDAC model. And she's going to be sharing a little bit about her hopes for this opportunity and why she thinks it fits so well. So before we actually go to our speakers, I am just going to take the liberty of sharing a little bit about the Centre for Justice Innovation itself, for those of you who may be a little bit less familiar with who we are and what we do. So we are a not-for-profit organisation that is seeking to build a justice system that is fair and effective for everyone. We believe that our justice systems should be focused on solving the issues that drive the difficulties families face and that bring them into these systems, and that it should be fair in how it's treating people. So as an organisation, we do deliver a range of work to deliver that vision. We work and provide hands-on support with practitioners. We conduct research, we look at how things are working, how things could be improved. And part of our work is also about promoting evidence-based and innovative justice policy reforms. So you can understand that our Expert Voices seminar series is really at the heart of this approach that we have. And our previous events have covered a wide range of topics across all of our justice systems. So if anybody is interested, they are all available to watch on YouTube. And the events that we run, they are free, they are open to everyone. We're aiming for them to be as accessible as possible for people, range of different backgrounds, regardless of your kind of prior level of understanding. These events are also part of a kind of much wider programme of work that we do that is very much around promoting the voices of practitioners and academics who are leading on exploring kind of the crucial issues, the main focuses that are going on within our justice systems today. And with that in mind, today our focus is on hope. And research on hope has significantly increased in recent decades. I think we can all recognise that there is growing recognition that the value of hope, the sense of hope, has a role in physical, social, and mental health outcomes, including promoting resilience. And today, hope is considered one of the most well-studied constructs within the field of positive psychology. So we're really delighted that Claire and our Hope Mom has been able to join us today, because I think the idea of creating hope when families are being separated, when they've experienced so much trauma and pain, can potentially kind of present as quite an alien or difficult idea. But we absolutely cannot underestimate the power of hope in helping families and individuals make changes, support progress, and support their decision making. And as a family justice system and as practitioners, creating hope really is a crucial element of the work that we do, but it doesn't always feel like our systems are set up in a way that helps us to do that, even though we know it's such an important tool and it's really effective for recovery and change. So without any further ado or any extras from me, I'm going to hand over to Claire so we can share and we can hear about an initiative that is doing just that, despite the challenges that are being faced. So Claire, over to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sophie, and thank you so much for the invitation to join you this afternoon. My name's Claire Mason. I'm a research fellow at the Centre for Child and Family Justice Research and the lead on the Giving Hope project. So I'm just going to start by giving a little bit of background into how Giving Hope came about. I'm going to give you an introduction specifically to the Hope Boxes, and then I'm going to be in conversation with one of our Hope mothers who absolutely sit at the heart of this innovation. So if you could move on to the next slide, please. So there's been lots of people involved in where we've got to today. So I'm not going to read through the slide, but just to acknowledge that I often get the opportunity to talk about Giving Hope and talk about Born Into Care, but I'm part of a much bigger team. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So the Giving Hope offer is underpinned by the Born Into Care research series. So this is a mixed methods research series led by Professor Karen Broadhurst at our centre at Lancaster University, and in conjunction partnership with Nuffield Family Justice Observatory, who funded the study, the Sale Data Bank at Swansea, and the Rees Centre at Oxford. And the work that really led to the Giving Hope project was the qualitative Born Into Care research that led to the production of the best practice guidelines, which were published in 2023. And I think part of why Giving Hope has taken off in the way it has is because it is underpinned by a really strong voice from those with lived experience of the system. On to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to give you a couple of bits of data. This isn't my work. This is work that was originally done by the Data Partnership at Nuffield, and then updated more recently by Nuffield Family Justice Observatory team. So, and I think it's really important to put it into this context, because what we see is that the rates of newborns in care proceedings, so we're talking about proceedings being issued within 2 weeks of birth, continue to increase. So we're now at, as you can see from this slide, whilst there's been a slight dip in the number of under ones in care proceedings, if you look at the proportion of those that are newborns, that has now increased to 55% of all under ones. So there is a significant proportion of those babies in care proceedings in England. Next slide, please. And I think the other really important piece of context is about how quickly those first hearings are taking place. So in the majority of newborn cases, there are only 1 to 2 days notice between the issue of the application and that first hearing. And again, the latest work by the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory has shown that for those newborns that are subject to same-day hearings has increased from 1 in 10 to 1 in 5 over the last 10 years. And I think there's also regional variation with a particular issue in the north of England and in Wales. And I think the reason this matters so much is if we start to think about what this means for the people involved, we are talking about women who are having to get their heads around a really complicated bureaucratic process within hours of days of giving birth. And those of us that have had children, I'm sure will understand what that means in terms of your psychologically, but also physiologically, what it must feel like to try to get to grips with such a complicated process, when actually what we really want them to be doing is focusing on their newborn baby. But somehow the system kind of intervenes in that process because we're having to get them ready to appear in court so quickly. And I think there are real questions that we raised in the Born Into Care research, and particularly in the urgent hearings report, about what does that mean for women's capacity to meaningfully take part, and the fairness attached to that. Next slide, please. So the kind of full findings from the Born Into Care qualitative work are available in this report, which is on the Nuffield Family Justice Observatory website, and the guidelines are there too. But I just wanted to highlight a few really key issues that I think really that Giving Hope really speaks to. So the research really highlighted the lack of trauma-informed care for women in this situation. Now, this isn't because people weren't doing their absolute utmost, but it is just about the timing of the process, the amount of support given to practitioners, and in some cases, the way in which the systems are aligned. So midwives told us about their frustration of not feeling that they had enough notice of when care proceedings were going to take place. It made it very difficult for them to prepare the women or to give them the support they needed. Similarly, social workers found it very difficult. There was often a change in midwife in the antenatal period, or it wasn't the midwife that was at the initial child protection conference, for example. Midwives told us they didn't get enough training around understanding the kind of system around care proceedings, and indeed the nuance of trying to care for a woman that is facing proceedings. Poor preparation and planning around separation. So often women told us in the interviews they felt that they were racing back from court, not really knowing when they were actually going to be separated from their newborn. And that often happened very, very quickly. So the amount of time they had to say goodbye or to do any emotional preparation for that separation was very limited. Sometimes that was happening on main wards with other women around them. So how that felt in terms of shame and stigma was really pronounced. And actually what women told us really made the difference was just slowing that process down. So being given some choice about, for example, who they handed their baby to, being given choice about what outfit that baby went in, being able to walk their baby off the ward, being able to meet the person that was going to care for their baby. So in many instances, they hadn't set eyes on the person who was going to be caring for their baby, which again really triggered anxiety, particularly if they'd been in care themselves and had had very negative care experiences. And we know from the recurrent care data that was about 40% of women in recurrent care proceedings had been in care themselves. The psychological impact of the separation was really pronounced, and often, whilst there's been increasing focus on women's needs post proceedings, and we've seen a surge in understanding around recurrent care support services, for example, perhaps less attention is given to that immediate post-separation period. And because there's often a change in teams or a change in midwives, often the mother's kind of needs are lost at that point. So we had in the interviews women getting buses home from hospital alone, perhaps not even going home to somebody else. So walking into a house themselves with a house full of baby things because they'd been told to prepare for the possibility of that baby going home. So they're alone, they're a mother without their baby in their arms at a time when their body is screaming that they're a mother. Is it perhaps then a surprise that their mental health falls off a cliff? And what we see is a very kind of acute response to that. And so women told us that they might return to problematic coping strategies such as alcohol or substance use. They might not even be able to go home and actually can't face walking through the door. So we hear about women who become homeless at this point because they can't face being in a house with their babies items without their baby. We hear about women cutting themselves off from their networks of support because of the shame and the guilt. And the question we ask is, whose responsibility is the woman at that point? And in a lot of services, the social worker's focus is on the baby and placement and getting ready for proceedings. There's a change in midwife. They might not even get beyond routine postnatal support. And yet this is such a vital period if we're really going to give the woman the best chance possible of getting their baby back in their care. So the importance of that maternal identity, keeping connection to their baby and keeping some hope is absolutely essential, but often so lacking in the system at this point. It's a complicated type of grief. That baby hasn't died. That baby's out there being cared for by somebody. And yet the grief is often also disenfranchised because of the shame and stigma, women often feeling that they can't turn to anybody at this point. And what we learned through the research is sometimes it's the smallest things that can have the biggest ramifications. So that detail of really thinking about how we can support them to keep connection, to still feel like they're that baby's mother, may have a really significant impact longer term. Next slide, please. And if the moral and ethical issues aren't enough, we also have to think about what this means in terms of the cost to the system. So I've already set out that acute and chronic psychological impact, but there's also an economic impact if we start to think about what that kind of mental health crisis at this point might look like in terms of A&E admissions, access to mental health services, setting the woman up so that she may repeat this journey because she has a quick subsequent pregnancy, and of course the cost of that baby in longer term foster care. And there's been the latest Embrace findings really set this out for us. So when you look at perinatal deaths, and there's been a new paper being published by Kat de Backer at King's College, London, really important work that really shows how we really set women up to fail during that maternity process, and that actually the Embrace findings highlight that this group of women, 22% of those perinatal deaths, women were had children open to social care. So we know that there's a huge cost to women and to the system. Next slide, please. So through this process, we had the privilege of speaking to midwives, to social workers, to foster carers who had already recognised this as an issue, and were really seeing the importance of trying to keep connection between mother and baby. And these were exceptional innovators in the system that were trying to do something. So we had midwives who were offering mothers what was really set out for a bereavement box for when a baby sadly died close to birth, but could see if they could give the baby something of the mother something of the baby when they left the ward. It might help. We had foster carers who were trying to send things to the mother that at family time that smelt of the baby to help them. And we had social workers who were sort of going above and beyond to give information to the mother about how the baby had settled, or giving more than perhaps the routine information to really help her to hold on to that maternal identity. All the way through this research, we'd worked with a group of women with lived experience of separation at birth that had helped guide us through the Born into Care research. So they'd been part of the guidelines, they understood what we were trying to achieve. But when they heard this evidence, they were, there's really something here. We need to be doing more, but this shouldn't be a postcode lottery. This shouldn't be something that's an adaptation of a bereavement box. Women need something that's bespoke, and we want to work on that. So we set out on this process of co-production. And 12 months later, the Hope boxes were born. Next slide, please. So Giving Hope is a now a community interest company, and at the heart of it sits the Hope boxes, and we're just going to play you a short clip that will introduce you to the Hope boxes. Next slide, please.
Each year, more than 3,000 mothers in England are separated from their newborn babies due to safeguarding concerns. They are often given very little notice, with the initial court hearing that will determine their baby's future being held within days or even hours of giving birth. Their worlds are turned completely upside down. If the judge orders an initial separation, the baby is temporarily placed into someone else's care. The court will later make a final decision where the baby should live long term. This process will likely take 6 months. The mother is left overwhelmed with feelings of emptiness, anger, and shame. A mother usually sees her baby for an hour at a time, organised by the local authority. While trying to find their feet, mothers are left managing grief, loss, and stigma. It is lonely. The Hope boxes help them to feel connected to their baby and still feel like a mother. Each Hope box contains carefully chosen items to support a mother with grief, emptiness, anger, and shame. A baby book, shared with the baby's carer, helps the mother feel part of her baby's day-to-day life. She is comforted by a glance at memories and firsts she may otherwise have missed. Both mother and baby have a blanket that is swapped at family time. The mother's smell comforts her baby and helps them to settle in their new surroundings. The smell of her baby allows the mother to feel connected. The hope boxes have been created by a group of mothers who understand the pain of separation. They send a message of hope. Hold on, pain eases. The hope boxes help mothers through this dark time with items that provide comfort and connect them to their babies. This connection will be crucial if they are separated long term. The child's hope box will, as they grow, help the child understand their identity and to know they have always been loved. Separation between mothers and babies happens for varied reasons and with different outcomes. Mothers often feel labelled rather than supported. There is a lack of understanding of the trauma and challenges that mothers face. The hope boxes can help build a bridge of understanding and transform stigma and isolation into solidarity and support. There are thousands of mothers and babies who could benefit from the hope boxes. For more information, please visit the Giving Hope website and find out how you can help.
So I hope that gives you an introduction into the purpose and design of the hope boxes. So as the video explains, there are two boxes. One goes with mother, one goes with baby. And at the start, they are about reducing that trauma at the point of separation. They're a tool for practitioners too. They give midwives or social workers, family support practitioners a way of saying, we see your pain and we see you as this baby's mother. They contain items that can be swapped while mother and baby are apart to really try to keep that connection. And because they've been produced by women with lived experience who see it as a gift, it reduces the stigma by connecting them to other women who've been through this experience. And then if after the end of proceedings, the decision is for a longer term separation, then they do become more like a traditional bereavement box, and they are there to help the mother with the loss and the grief. But really importantly, they're there for the child as they grow to connect them back to their earliest experiences and really help them with their sense of self and their identity. And if that family goes on to have another child in the future, that box also represents that sibling who is no longer with their birth family, which we know again is something that women really struggled with. They told us in interviews that trying to explain to other children why older siblings are not in their care was really difficult, and somehow this box might help with that process too. So the purpose of the boxes changes as we go across the system. It's underpinned by 5 key principles, which are on the next slide. So they are promoting identity, maternal identity in the way that I've described, because we really believe, and women tell us, that this could be the thing that really motivates women to stay engaged with services and to receive the support and that they might need in order to bring about the change for themselves and for their baby. Recognising the grief and loss for all concerned, trying to reduce the trauma of separation, giving hope, hold on, pain eases, the message from our Hope Mothers, and really supporting connections, connection between mother and baby, connection between foster carer or kinship carer and baby, and connection between practitioners who are supporting the mother and working with the box and the mother herself, or indeed with the baby, and those practitioners might be supporting that growing child to understand their identity. So I'm really delighted to be able to welcome with me today Brooklyn, one of our Hope Mothers. And if we could take the slides down, and Brooklyn's going to join me now to talk about the hope boxes from her perspective as a woman with lived experience of separation, but also lived experience of FDAC. So Brooklyn, thank you so much for joining us today. And I'd just really like to start by asking you how you see the hope boxes fitting into the FDAC process.
So I personally think that the hope boxes will, just really complement the amazing work that's done at FDAC already. As a mum that's been through the FDAC process, Knowing the work that is done there and the work that we've done to make these boxes, it helps with the integration of maintaining that mum's identity as a mother. It's also, it's a positive reinforcement of being able to engage with that parent, to help give, from my perspective, help give a mum more encouragement to continue working with professionals. Because by the point that they've reached FDAC, they've already engaged with loads of professionals, and it can become a kind of, them against you kind of situation. And I think that if you've got the hope boxes, which help to maintain the bond between the mum and the child, but also helps the mum to be able to work through her stuff, but also be able to see that she is a mum, and that, the members of FDAD that she'll be working with actually see her as that, and help to reinforce, that positivity of knowing that this is actually your role, regardless of where your child may be.
Yeah. Thanks, Brooklyn. And I wonder, could you maybe choose a couple of items in the box that you think, maybe have particular significance to you? All the Hope Women have a particular favourite item, and they've very much been built out of the voices of women. But is there a couple you'd like to choose and explain to everybody?
Yeah, so there is, I think every item in the box is absolutely amazing. However, I think one of the ones that is really important to me was the book that you can write in. I think because when I, went through FDAC, one of the key things that came out for me was about reclaiming my voice, as a mother and as an individual going through, a really traumatic process. And that book for me signified being able, would signify for me being able somewhere to put all my thoughts and my feelings, because you kind of are expected to go into all these meetings and retain all this information, and you've got not just, the court proceedings, you've got about the worry about where your baby is, you've got about what your life looks like outside of all of this. And I just feel like that is a really kind of like a grounding technique. Um, you've got the acknowledgement of birth, because for some mums they don't get that. They're not given, a copy of their child's birth certificate. And ultimately, in forward thinking, if that child is to, if it's unsuccessful and that child is to be placed for adoption, the adoptees have the right to change the baby's name. So that, that acknowledgement of birth is something that keeps that mum connected with her baby, what her personal views and wishes for what her baby was, the baby record as well, because, I think something that can get lost along the way amongst professionals is the firsts. There's lots of firsts that will happen for that baby, especially if it's taken away at birth, that mum won't be able to be privy to. So, that book, that record that can be swapped in contact time between the foster carer and the mum, just gives that mum that little bit more incentive. Because one of the things that, me and the rest of the Hope mums, was kind of one of the things that we really wanted to underpin in it all was, it's the little things, that are little tiny bits that, can quite overly be overlooked by professionals. Like first smiles, first rolling over, first teeth, like first haircut, when your baby sleeps through the night, because that's something that our mum won't get. And even if the baby is returned back into that mum's care, a lot of the first will be missed. But to be able to have a book that shows you, where, what your baby's first have been, it keeps you connected, and it also helps the bonding in the reunification process.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Brooklyn's referring to is this Hello Baby milestone book that the women have developed, that obviously, as you said, Brooklyn, a lot of those books that you buy off the shelf just don't work for women that aren't with their babies. And so you've designed your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And I suppose my last question to you really is about, why do you think it's so important that this has been co-produced so that you as a group of Hope Mothers are at the heart of the offer?
So I think the the most significant part about the fact that it had to be co-produced was because it is, very easy to sit and read textbook. Not saying that, it's not hard to get a degree in social work and all the rest of it. That is, however, it's there's a difference between reading it and living it. Like I pinpointed before, some of the littler things that will be overlooked by a professional, that's more about the safeguarding and the well-being of the child and all the rest of it. The lived experience aspects gives you the little things that, that can be overlooked genuinely. And I think ultimately as well, it was also about being able to put the emotion back into it. It's about reminding kind of everybody, that we're all kind of one wrong decision away from being on the other side of the table that you work at. And also just, I think, when it comes to the mothers that receive these boxes, I think they're more likely to be more receptive if they know that somebody that has, potentially walked the walk that they're about to walk, has designed every aspect of this, has thought about it, and it's not just a bandage or consolation prize for having your baby taken away. It's actually about, whether they know it or not, there's a group of, some amazing mums that are rooting for them, whether we know their story personally or not, because we've been there. And like, like our slogan says, hold on, pain eases. I think that is what makes it so important that it had to be co-designed with people that had experienced it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brooklyn, and I'm sure everybody will join me in really thanking you for being here, because hearing from you directly is so much more powerful than anything I could ever say. So thank you so much. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we pass to Helen?
I just want to say thank you. I think firstly, thank you for everybody that's taken the time out to join on this. I think because as much as obviously that we've created it with with the amazing work off of the Born into Care research and all of that, it takes one of my favorite sayings is it takes a village to raise a child. And I think in order to make change, it takes a village. And that looks like everybody that's on this screen, taking the time out to learn more about what it is, learn about how it can impact the work that you do. And I think also just like with the thought of it going into FDAC, like I said, I've had personal experience of FDAC and it was a very successful case. I've got my little girl back living with me. But I think that if that box had also been a part of FDAC, it would have just been something that even if my story had have been different, it would have been a way to just be able to continue the work. Because I think what can also be forgotten is that birth is traumatic. Going through this process is traumatic. And then when it's ended, there is nothing left for the mum. There's no kind of support for the mum, where these hope boxes give the access to continuing the work. Because obviously when a baby is taken into care and and whether it's fostered or adopted, there is life story work done for that baby. Like Claire pointed out in the slides, that, this box also gives the opportunity for life story work to be done for mum and significant family members as well. So yeah, I think just ultimately, I am really excited to hear, and I hope that it does get implemented into FDAC, because I'm a very big advocate for FDAC and the work that they do.
Thanks, Brooklyn. Thank you again so much for being here. So as Brooklyn has said, we're working hard to implement the hope boxes across the country. We're now in, I think, 57 areas. It takes quite a bit of work because it has to be a cross pathway offer, so a cross agency offer, because it is in the first instance about keeping connection, to try to give the mother the best chance possible of improving things for her so that the baby can come home. And if that isn't possible, then it moves on to being about that kind of life story work and loss and grief. We have developed a digital training offer now that accompanies the hope boxes, and a name very familiar to you, Dr. Sheila Webb has supported us with the production of that training too. So incredibly grateful to her. And we are, for the Birmingham, and I'll bring Helen in at this point, we're really excited to be our first kind of pilot site of also implementing into FDAC at the same time as we set up the rest of that pathway. So I'll pass to Helen now just to say a little bit about where we're at. We're at the beginning stages, Helen, but really excited to be working with you on this.
So we're trying to pin Helen. Bear with us a second. I know that Helen was having some tech issues earlier today. Welcome, Helen. You're joining now. And we have said to Helen, because of her tech issues, that like if she needs to leave her camera off to have these conversations, that is absolutely fine. We'd rather have her input than not have her here at all. Just before Helen does start, I was going to say if there are any questions at all following on from that fabulous conversation, Claire, thank you so much. And thank you so much, Brooklyn, as well. Please do pop them into the Q&A and we'll try and pick them up afterwards. So Helen, I'm hoping that we are okay enough to hear you. So let's see if this is going to work. I'm not sure.
She's still on mute, I think.
Yeah, Helen, are you able to come off mute and join us? Oh, I think she is really having difficulties today. The efforts just to get her in were quite impressive during that conversation. Well, Claire, what I was going to say then, I know that we've kind of had these discussions with Helen, haven't we? So I'm hoping that Helen might jump in if we are missing anything. But when Helen reached out to you about the opportunity of Hope Boxes within FDAC, what stood out for you in terms of that partnership? What did you think was probably going to make it the most successful?
Well, I think because we've got a real commitment from the hospitals in Birmingham and also from Breathe Together Connect, which is a specialist service offered in Birmingham that does work with families who have experienced previous adoption and are pregnant again, or indeed they do post-adoption support. So they have a therapeutic offer and they were already implementing the Hope Boxes. And I think Helen said to me that a mother had come into the FDAC service with a Hope Box. And it was the first time she'd seen one, but she could immediately see the possibilities of how the key worker could work with the mother with the box around that kind of identity of her as a mother. And it felt like a really important part of the puzzle that perhaps we were missing. So we sort of seized on it and thought of it as a really good opportunity. And of course, there's you've heard we had women within our Hope Mothers group who also experienced FDAC, and they were absolutely, this would have been a really brilliant resource to use. And I think the beauty of the Hope Boxes. Oh, here she is, Helen.
I'm hoping you can hear me now.
Yeah, we can.
I'm so sorry. This laptop today, I'm putting it down to the weather. My camera won't come on either now. Oh, sorry.
Helen, I was going to say it's all about hope, and we got you. So Claire was very helpfully just sharing a little bit.
About.
Yeah, it was sharing a little bit around that partnership and the recognition of the partners around it and the fact that you'd had the experience of a mum coming through with a Hope Box. So that's been a really lovely introduction. But I was going to say we are more than happy to hand over to you now to share your hopes for this initiative being embedded within Birmingham and Solihull FDAC and kind of what you think that might look like. And if you drop off again, don't worry, we will continue.
Thanks, Sophie. So I think we had a mum that came from FDAC and she alerted us to the Hope Box. So she was working with a service called Breaking the Cycle due to having previous children adopted, and they'd given her, as part of their therapeutic intervention work with her, they'd given her a Hope Box. So that's how we first became familiar with the idea. Then we got in touch with Claire, had conversations with Claire, and then looking at piloting it in our FDAC as well. So we cover Birmingham and Solihull, but it seems to align perfectly with Birmingham Children's Trust because their practice model is one called Connection Counts. And I think with the Hope Boxes for the Hope Mums, it is very much about building that relationship with the mother, the relationship-based practice that we've got to do, and coming from a trauma-informed model as well. I think the mum, like what Brooklyn was saying as well, the mum that we had through FDAC, she was very much, she'd write in the book, she'd speak to the foster care about the baby, she'd put all the milestones in. So, and even I've got a blanket here, I don't know if you can, the blanket, and then the mum can put her smell on it and then give it to baby and they can swap. And I think it is just about that real connection. So we're looking at rolling it out across the service. So aligning with Birmingham Children's Trust and Breaking the Cycle, who have now changed the name to Breathe Trust Connect, because of the people with lived experience there. I think it'll work perfectly in FDAC. I think a lot of the mums that come through FDAC, it is majority mums that come through compared to dads, but we do have dads as well. But the mums have had previous removals, and they've gone through standard proceedings before. And I think, like Brooklyn was saying, sometimes you can be forgotten that you are a mum. So I think it's really important to keep that connection with the baby whilst they're being supported through care proceedings, which is a really tricky time in itself. So the hope for the future is to roll it out to all the mums with the newborns, to just allow them to remain connected with their baby as part of a really difficult time in proceedings.
Oh, thank you so much, Helen. Actually, one of the things that you were saying that stood out to me as well, in terms of small things have really big ramifications, and what was shared then around managing the firsts and being able to experience the firsts, and how it can really build confidence that mothers are still seen as a mum, and actually have confidence that practitioners and services still see them as a mum, and that they've got a really important role to play regardless of what the outcomes of proceedings are around that. That was so powerful, what was shared by Brooklyn during that as well. That bond, keeping that bond between mother and child through this time, when so many families have shared with us when they first start coming into proceedings, why should I bother? What's the point? And actually, this is something straight away that people can be working through and sharing those experiences with as well. I just also wanted to say, Claire, one of the things that stood out as well was very much around that purpose of how the Hope Box can be flexible depending on the need of the family, particularly in terms of the conversations with siblings and the wider families as well. And I didn't know if you just had any other kind of experience or feedback around any parent, or if there's a little that could share around that, because I think that was something that was really important, given that families and children aren't in isolation, are they? We are within much wider networks.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some, we've just started a new project funded by Adoption England to think about the role of the Hope Boxes with adopted families, and we had two fabulous workshops last week with adopters who absolutely saw the value of the Hope Box with children as they grow. We had a lovely example of them talking about the role that the elephant could play in letterbox contact. So there's an elephant that the mother and baby both get, which is probably our favourite, because it's become very it's become like there it is. And them talking about how much they struggle sometimes knowing what to write in letters, and we know that absolutely from our Hope mothers, and how they could talk about what the elephant had been up to. You know, a bit like a child does when a lot of schools do it, don't they, when they bring a teddy home. And so we were talking about that. They were really talking about one of our Hope mothers, is her child is now 18, and she is thinking about, you know, if they are going to see each other, and talked about the idea that they both walk in the room with holding the elephant, and how immediately that kind of sends a message that they've kept each other in mind. We've had some feedback about the use of the boxes in family time, and you know, as you'll know, that often newborn babies sleep a lot, and so the chances of you being in your family time session with your baby asleep are quite high. It can be really anxiety provoking for parents who are trying to show their capability as a parent. And so being able to do some of the items in the box, write in the book, do the hand and footprint kit, is also another way of really helping to kind of regulate some of those emotions. We had a lovely example of a mother who had previous separations, and had it just been too much for her to even stay on the maternity ward, and had almost left immediately from the labour room. But she'd been offered a Hope Box, and she didn't want one for herself, but she really wanted her baby to have one. And she did stay and fill in some of the first few pages of that Hello Baby book, because she knew that her baby would have some knowledge that she could give to that baby. And she fed back to her midwife that she felt that at least this time she'd been able to do something positive for her baby. And I guess what that might mean in terms of her own shame and stigma could be quite important going forward. It also meant she stayed on the ward, which meant she got some postnatal checks. So in terms of her own well-being, that was really important. Now, these are anecdotal at the moment, of course, and we have put in a bid to do a proper evaluation of the impact of giving hope. So watch this space for updates when and if that happens.
Oh, thank you, Claire, so much, so much. And yes, I was going to say we'll look forward to hopefully hearing how that progresses. I am going to share now some questions and some reflections that have come through on the Q&A for us. Thank you, those of you who have shared. Stephanie has shared, thank you to yourself and to yourself, Brooklyn, as well. Really great to hear that your daughter is back in your care. As a practice lead for family safeguarding, they are spending a lot of time working with local authorities on reunification, and will now be ensuring that local authorities that she works with considers this practice guidance within their practice and hopefully is able to utilise the hope boxes. So that is wonderful to hear. Thank you so much. One of the queries that come through from Claire Turnbull was around, is there any specific issues with regards to mothers with learning difficulties and hope boxes and resources that support mums with these needs? I can see you nodding there, Claire.
Yeah, it's one of the kind of projects we've got on the horizon. So, I mean, they are really tangible things in the boxes. So we've had some discussions with specialist services that work with parents with learning difficulties about that. And because a lot of them are items that you touch and feel, we think that speaks really well to parents that have got those additional learning needs. And some of our hope mothers indeed also have additional learning needs. However, we are also aware that there are things in there that are written, and we want to think about how we develop that more going forward. So we are hoping to kick off a project a little bit later this year into next year where we look at specifically around parents with additional learning needs. Similarly for fathers, I'm sure there'll be a question about fathers coming. We at the moment, this was developed as a mother-to-mother project. We are really aware that something similar might work for fathers, but because we do everything through co-production, we're waiting to do a co-production project with fathers. So we're looking for some funding and are hoping that we'll do the father's co-production work. It might look the same, it might look completely different. We don't want to sort of second guess that, really.
Thanks, Claire. Yes, I think the question, I was going to give the question or ask the question about fathers, because that's always a really interesting topic as well. Looking at some of the other questions that are coming in, Claire, again, as you were saying, from being in Leicestershire and Rutland, you're acknowledging the Leicestershire and Rutland midwives have developed a box, but it isn't actually integrated with children's services, and was just asking a little bit around kind of how to support the integration of these practices, recognising that any of this kind of work really does support the potential to continue to provide physical and mental health support for mum. So I appreciate this is around boxes, but it's also, I think, for me, a little bit around how we are supporting the integration of these initiatives across services.
Yeah, so the Giving Hope offer, we're really clear that it starts with a multi-agency steering group. So we've learned a lot from our earlier sites where we didn't have that as embedded. And we now know that that's what you need. So we will ask for whoever's leading it, and sometimes that's being led by midwives, sometimes it's being led by children's social care, to bring together representatives from the different parts of the system. So that includes your regional adoption agency, that includes your perinatal mental health services, named midwife for safeguarding, front door of social care, and obviously foster care, kinship care, and FDAC if you have an FDAC, to really think about what your pathway looks like, because it does look a little bit different in different areas. So we will take you through that process and do sort of support a steering group into developing a pathway. We have a site readiness check before they go live, so that we make sure those bits of the pathway are in place, and then we provide the hope boxes. So in areas where they're not using the hope boxes, but have had another offer, that is usually the bit that's missing. So often it's been midwifery led in the way that I described, often an adaptation of a bereavement pathway, but they don't have that kind of really strong support from children's social care. And that's the key, because this isn't about offering a mum a box and then that's the end of it. This is about something that is worked with. It's active as it follows mother and baby across the pathway. And the baby box, that's the other real distinct difference, because it really matters that that work is done in tandem with that child's identity too.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think that's a really important point. There's a box for the baby and there's a box for the mum. So it's 2 boxes for that family, isn't it? Thank you. Natalie has shared that they're looking to introduce Hope Boxes in Sheffield. She's going to be sharing the information to the lead of this. There is obviously the recognition that we do need to support mums, families who are coming through that court experience, the challenges that are there. She's asking questions around are other services offering this across the country? And I appreciate you mentioned that how many areas now that you are looking at delivering Hope Boxes in?
So it depends how you count it, but if we count it from the hospital trust, then it's 57 partnerships at the level of an individual, but sometimes there's more than one hospital under a hospital trust. Sometimes it's not the midwife offering. Some areas it's been where they've had a specialist pre-birth team. It might be the social worker that's kind of leading, or a family support practitioner. So slightly different models, but about 57 areas of the country.
Fantastic. So in answer to your question, Natalie, it's not quite a missed opportunity, but we definitely want it to be able to expand into other areas as well. And actually that kind of links into, I think we've probably got time for the last couple of questions, which are around if areas are wanting to get set up, like what are the next steps around that? And there was a question around, do local authorities need training to use the Hope Boxes? And I appreciate you touched on that a little bit. So it'd be great to understand a little bit more what that training would look like.
Sure. So the process is that you get in touch with us. I think the chat is turned off, but the email address is info@givinghope.org.uk. And we will then get in touch with you about sort of that site setup process, and we'll support that. There is a cost to the training and there is a cost to the boxes, but not to the support that we offer. And depending on how quickly you can get your steering group set up and get things underway, we will support you with getting that pathway put into place. So on average, I would say it's taking people maybe 4 to 6 months to go from first contact to actually using the boxes. The training, there's 2 levels. So there's one level that's aimed at the steering group, so particularly around implementation and what that looks like, and it takes them through that. And then a level that's aimed at the people that are going to be championing the use of the boxes and doing the direct work with the boxes. And that has 5 modules to it. So it includes a module made with the women with lived experience about every item in the box, what it's there for, why they've chosen it. There's a module on trauma-informed practice that's led by Dr. Sheena Webb. There's a module on grief and loss and thinking about different forms of grief and loss in this space. That's led with Dr. Danny Taggart. And then there's work around supporting practitioners and thinking about how to support practitioners working in this space. So it's quite a long, it's a digital training course. It's quite in depth, but you can do it in kind of bite-sized pieces depending on your own kind of workload. So you basically get access for a month. So that's how it works. So that's how you set up. So get in touch and we can support you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Claire. And Rachel has just shared on here that she just wanted to say how much of an amazing service this is and what a difference it can make. And there are real hopes that it can be introduced within the Coventry and Warwickshire FDAC. So there might be some conversations coming your way, Claire, around that. There was, of course, also huge thanks going out to Brooklyn for her contributions to this as well. It is seriously appreciated. There's just been a sneaky couple of questions come in, and we have got a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to check in. Number 1, do you work in Wales? Is one of the questions that's coming in, and the second one is, how can someone find out whether areas are already involved, but they just haven't been communicated to them?
Yeah. Okay. So we are moving into Wales. So we've got some conversations happening, but we aren't providing into Wales at the moment. That's not because we don't want to. We just need to do the work to get there. And we are also looking at Scotland. So we've got a lot of interest from Scotland too, and Northern Ireland actually. So hoping we'll go UK wide for too long. In terms of how you find out whether there is an active site or not, we are hoping to get that onto our website. We have literally just this last month moved our operations into a not-for-profit social enterprise because it's got beyond being a university project. So there is a website and it's not on there yet, but we will list where we are active on there. Meantime, if you email us at info@givinghope.org.uk, then with your question of whether you're a live site or not, we can let you know. It's slightly complicated because, as you will already understand, the boundaries mean that so often we'll get a health trust approach us, but they'll be working with more than one local authority. And then that local authority might boundary another health trust. So sometimes, as we expand, it's not clear cut. So it will be about telling us which local authority you're in or which health trust you're in, and we'll be able to tell you whether they're active or not at the moment.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much, Claire. I am clocking time and we have literally just run to 29 minutes past 1 o'clock. So apologies if there are any other questions coming through. We are going to wrap it up now. So thank you, Claire. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Brooklyn. And thank you for everyone else who's kind of contributed to the conversations. This recording will be available on our YouTube channel, so you can look back over it. You can get the email address again if needed to link in with Claire. And we will be reaching out once it is available. If you are interested in anything else that we do at the centre, there are links to our newsletters, the YouTube channels, anything else that we are running in the chat and in the Q&A section. We also have our social media links on there as well. But I would just like to say a final thank you so much. It was a wonderful session this afternoon, and I look forward to hearing all of the developments that I'm sure are going to happen over the next year and being able to expand this even further. Thank you very much, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Thanks very much. Thanks,
Thank
Brooklyn.
you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
That's right.
Thanks,
Thank
Sophie.
you, guys.
Thanks, Helen. Bye.